Welcome to The Anxious Voyage. If you think that title sounds bleak or foreboding, one of two things must be true. You're very lucky, or you need to get out more. On this program, we share stories of life and living. We compare notes. We discover commonalities. We accept that life is a glorious, heartbreaking thing, and we embrace and celebrate all of it. Take the ride with us. We're glad you're here. Now, here's your host, Mark O'Brien.
Hello from wherever you are. We are coming to you, as always, from World Headquarters in Middletown, Connecticut, which is, as you all know, the pinnacle capital of the world. I am beyond delighted to introduce my guest today. She is Sarah Spear. She has founded a company called Empowered Together. I've invited her here to tell her story, but first, I would like to tell you one, and that includes you, Sarah. So first of all, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here and to learn that Middletown is the pinnacle capital. I didn't know that until just now.
It's actually something different every week, so you probably have to be here. So Sarah and everyone else, what I would like you to know is that on June 13th, I was on a program on this radio station with Teresa Velarde, who published my most recent book. 2 days later, on June 15th, I met you at the, make sure I got this right, for Tech boot camp. You were one of 13 women who were invited to present your concept for startup businesses. For whatever this is worth, forgive my subjectivity, I thought you were woefully overlooked.
Thanks, Mark.
So I made it a point to introduce myself to you, I'm sure you recall. And during our conversation, I told you, you told me about your daughter, and I told you about my special needs brother for whom I'm a guardian. And we had an emotional moment. And you asked me if you could hug me. Yeah. And I, of course, said yes, and thank you for that. Since I'd been on the program on Tuesday, I had been thinking about the idea of a program on this network. And what I would like you to know, I don't know how you think you affect people or the extent to which you do, but I got in my car to leave Farmington that day after we met, and the idea of this radio show felt like purpose. And I knew that at some point you needed to be on this show to share your story. So I called Deborah Beauvais, the owner of this station, the very next day, Friday, June 16th. And I said, may I please have a show on this network? And she had remembered my being on the Tuesday prior. And that's where all of this began. So thank you.
I didn't know that history, but it's beautiful to hear. And it does sound like this was meant to be.
No doubt about that. And it's always on my mind that you gave me this. So thank you. I do want to learn about and share with our listeners and viewers about your business, Empowered Together. But if you don't object, I would like to start a little bit before that with your business background, which is quite accomplished. And I think, please correct me if I'm wrong, my sense is that it gave you the confidence and perhaps even the technological wherewithal to do what you're doing with Empowered Together. So please tell us about your business background, where maybe even what you studied in school and how you got into that background.
I was actually thinking of starting there because I was a chemistry undergrad and I got to intern with Bayer Pharmaceuticals. Some of you may remember or know of Bayer aspirin. And I worked in a lab with some wonderful people. I also learned that working in a lab was not going to be my life's calling, that I enjoyed talking with people too much to be working in a lab with test tubes. So grateful for that experience because it was transformative, and I really didn't practice chemistry after that, even though I got my degree in that. And I went on to work in experiential education, outdoors. I had a long-term service time in Kathmandu, Nepal, and I ended up going back to business school because I realized that business was more my calling. I did spend a year in Ireland. I know you're Irish, Mark. So
Just a
my
little.
last year in undergrad, I was in Ireland and I was finishing up my chemistry requirements, but I also got to take business courses. And that was what compelled me to go back into business. And I thought that I might like to have an experiential education company. So doing ropes courses and team building with executive groups and student groups. And I emerged from that program at University of California, Irvine, and ended up going into HR. So I was definitely using the business background. I was getting to talk with lots and lots of people, some good conversations, some hard conversations. And I went on a mountaineering trip to India and ended up climbing a peak, being the part of a team that was the first recorded team to climb that peak called Chakri Peak. And it just put this drive in me to return to India in some business capacity. So I did a fellowship in India first, and then met my co-founders of pharma safeguarding startup. And the way we did that was sold a coding system to pharma manufacturers in India that they printed on their medicine. And then you or I, as a consumer, when we bought that medicine, could test that the coding system on our medicine was real and not counterfeit, because counterfeit medicine was both harmful to the consumer and eroding the brand of pharma manufacturers. So that was my first foray into a startup business. And I was there for a couple of years before exiting that business.
I just want to take a quick tangent and talk about your climbing that peak. What did you learn from that, and how do you think it taught it to you?
We had a lot of support for that trip, and so it was so humbling to have other people doing literally the heavy lifting of carrying a lot of the stuff that we required to be able to make that summit attempt. I learned about the kindness of other humans, and also as an American, I had so much gear and such nice stuff with me, and yet there were people carrying heavy bags in flip-flops. So it was kind of humbling all around that, hey, I may have this conception of what I need in this life, but probably that is overinflated, and I probably need much less than I realize. Getting to the top, I think anytime we kind of have those mountaintop experiences, whether they're literal or figurative, they can be transformative in showing us how small we really are in the grand scheme of things. And yes, we each have an important role and purpose to play in this earth, but I think it also reminded me, getting up to the top of the peak, where I could see off into this other valley that I couldn't see from our ascent, just a range in the Himalayas, in the north of India, that was beyond the sight of most humans. And just, it put me in proper context of how small I was in this world. And not to diminish the importance of each person and what we bring to this earth, but kind of helping me see that I'm part of something so much larger than myself.
I think there's in that being able to realize and accept our insignificance, I think there's what I'm going to describe as a necessary humility in that. And I mean, there have been occasions in which I felt exactly the same way. I don't know how else one could feel that, unless one were. I mean, for me, there are two things. One is, if you can find a sky that's not light polluted at some point, but to stand beneath a dark sky full of stars and realize how completely minuscule and insignificant you are, the first thing that occurs to me is, what do I have to worry about? I mean, I'm this teeny little thing. And also being by the ocean does the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I do want to share one other thing with you. I'm actually quite open about the fact that 25 years or so ago, I suffered terribly from depression. Cycling taught me something really valuable about that, because given my size, I'm not the typical cyclist. So climbing, riding up hills is significantly more challenging for me than it is for smaller people. But what I learned from doing that was that pain is temporary.
Yeah.
And I connected that to depression.
Yeah.
Temporary. And if the only thing you get from quitting is quitting, you don't get the satisfaction of having, I'm going to steal your term, reached a peak of anything.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can persist enough to reach that peak, then you've done it. And that's over. That struggle is over. And there's always going to be other struggles, obviously. So you started that business in India, and then did that lead to other things?
Well, 10 years later, it led to my second startup. And how that happened was I didn't have a personal connection to counterfeit medicine. I saw it as an important issue to be tackling. I wanted to be working on a social challenge from a for-profit lens, because I thought really there was a role for the market to play in helping humanity have safe medicine. I will also say that not having that personal connection, I got to the point as I was exiting the company where I realized I love startups. I want to come back to a startup, but the next time around, I want to have a personal connection to what the mission is, because I felt like that was going to be more aligned with the legacy that I want to leave behind here. So I ended up back in the US following PharmaSecure, which was my startup. And it's still going, by the way. It's under local leadership in Delhi, India. And when I got back to the US, I was still interested in social missions. And I went to work for Love 146, which is an anti-trafficking organization based in New Haven, Connecticut. And I actually had 2 stints there. I first worked there in communications when I moved back from India, and then I got married. My husband was active duty Air Force, and I moved out of Connecticut to be co-located with him. And then when he retired, we moved back to, well, he's from Florida, but we moved to Connecticut because my family is still here in Connecticut. And I returned to work at Love 146. I've been able to maintain good relationships there. So I've had roles overseeing communications, operations, at one point programs, and development or fundraising at Love 146. And that was the last job I had before feeling the need to get back into the startup scene.
Yeah. You said that when you did your second startup, you wanted to feel a more personal connection.
Yeah.
I have a reason for asking this question. Do you perceive that personal connection to be different from ego?
Yeah, absolutely. Because we're going to get into a later segment what my startup is, why, but it's connected to my daughter who has a disability. And my passion for my startup is to enact systemic change that makes the world different, so that my daughter, my son, my husband and I, and everyone we know gets to live in a world that's different and more accessible to people with disabilities. So I don't think there's ego there. I'm driven as a person of faith to recognize the dignity in each human and want to include every human. So when I think of what's the motivation here, it's really being driven by faith that God created everybody here on earth and has a purpose for us that we ought to be able to be included and live out that purpose.
I was going to go in a slightly different direction, but given what you just said about faith and God and purpose, my own experience is that I'm going to have to say old enough because I don't know that I'll ever be wise enough to even say that, but I feel like, yes, I believe in God. Yes, I believe that He has a purpose and a plan. But I finally got old enough to figure out it isn't my job to know what the plan is.
Mm-hmm.
My job is to recognize that there will be signs granted to me and to see them, contemplate and make the most responsible choices I can make in response to those. Did you feel anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, there are still things in my life that I wrestle with, like why did this happen? Why did my brother die, for example, in a car accident? That was 10 years ago. I don't have a satisfying answer to that. Why did you struggle through depression? I mean, I think we can look back and maybe see how God has used those things in our lives, but I'm sort of at a point where what I'm called to do is the next right thing. And I have a vision for my startup, but is that what it's going to be? Well, I hold that open-handedly because my job is to be faithful to what I'm called to do. And right now that's doing the next right thing that I know needs to be done.
20 years ago or more, I worked at an advertising agency. And when I was there, I learned the difference between doing things right and doing right things. And you said a moment ago that what you are working toward is systemic change. And it occurred to me when you said that if you had said systematic change, then you might have been preoccupied with, quote, doing things right. But making them systemic, part of the greater system, and being very much determined to do right things, I think not only puts you on the right path, but leaves you open to the signs that will continue to be revealed to you, and also not to fall into the trap of thinking that every step has to be perfect. Mm-hmm. Because if you take that and then think about it, you'll be able to determine whether you're where you thought you would be after that step. And if so, you take another one. And if you're not, you get to adjust, rethink, and maybe take a slightly different step. That seems to work for me anyway.
Yeah. And systemic change is huge. So it requires vision. And I think it's important to not lose sight that if we want to change the world, we have to have a vision for what it's going to look like. Mm-hmm. But every change begins with a single step and then mm-hmm. step after step. So I think that there's a both and to that, where I keep the end goal in mind, but the things that are immediately within my control are what are the next things that I'm doing. And like you said, seeing, okay, well, what's the impact of that? Is this heading in the right direction? What needs to change potentially?
That seems to entail a very comfortable relationship with control or the mm-hmm. lack thereof. Mm-hmm. At least for myself, it took me a while to disabuse myself of the notion that I could control the things that I really wanted to. No, I can't.
Yeah.
So it seems to me that that's a necessary part of the flexibility required to accomplish anything really meaningful, as you're attempting to do.
Yeah. And I think that's incredibly difficult. And maybe that's because I'm the firstborn, type A, high achiever, that maybe feels like a lot of what's happened is because I was controlling for that, which I know is not true. And yet, like you said, disabusing myself with the notion that having control over things is going to get me where I want to go. I find it's easier to do that in certain areas of my life. So quite honestly, I've been through hard experiences with jobs where I learned the hard way that over-identifying myself with any role, any business, causes me to take undue pride in achievements and suffer undue despair over things not going well. So because of that, I find it easier to, like I said, hold business outcomes open-handedly, knowing that I'm doing what I need to do in the role that I have. The area that I most struggle with that right now is in parenting. I was talking with somebody last week about this, of how I feel like I need to be there for my daughter and my son, to lead them and get the outcomes that we want them to have, they and myself. And so I just say that to remind myself, like, this is still very much a journey. And there are some areas of life where I find this easier to relinquish control than others.
Wow. Yeah. I'll just share this quickly, and then we need to take our first commercial break. But I was on a rather large Zoom call with a whole bunch of people. And there was a gentleman on the call named Daniel. And at one point, he had put his audio on mute. And a boy came into the room, and they had a little exchange. And then Daniel, I saw Daniel hand his phone to the boy. And then the boy kissed him and hugged him and left. So Daniel turned his audio back on. And when his opportunity to talk came up, he explained that he and his wife have adopted 6 or 7 children with disabilities. And he said, the young man who was just in the room is autistic. And he came in to ask me if he could borrow my phone. And I said to him, yes, but it's going to cost you. Do you know what it's going to cost you? And the boy said, yes, a kiss and a hug. And so he gave his father a kiss and hug. And then Daniel explained to us that one of the, I guess, manifestations or presentations of this young man's autism is that he thrives in clutter. So Daniel and his wife would always be on the young guy to get his room cleaned up and everything else, and he would do it. But 5 minutes later, it would be a complete disaster again. And then it dawned on Daniel and his wife, wait a minute, maybe that's the guy's element, and we ought to try to stop controlling that. And they did. And the house was considerably more peaceful. So anyway, that's a great point to make. And as you were saying what you were saying, I was also thinking about not only my sons, but now my grandchildren. And one of the gifts I think of being a grandparent is having a little more objectivity about what's going on and maybe not sweating the stuff that the parents do.
Yeah.
Very helpful. Okay, yeah. Thank you. We will take our first commercial break, and we will be back in about 3 minutes. See you then.
Everybody has a story. Everyone's story deserves to be told, and the only bad stories are the ones we don't share. That's why Mark O'Brien created The Anxious Voyage. It's Mark's conviction that every story deserves to be shared, and his purpose is to give people in all walks of life from any circumstances a chance to tell their stories. The Anxious Voyage is now on syndicated Dream Vision 7 radio network every Monday at 1 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Time, with live broadcast every first and third Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Please tune in, please join Mark, and please share your stories.
Ever wonder what it's like to have your own radio show? Well, wonder no longer, because you can dip into the radio airwaves by being host for the day on syndicated Dream Vision 7 radio network. It's a fabulous way to get your radio feet wet. It's an opportunity to market your business, modality, or book. have a guest, mention a sponsor, and take callers. Or you may want to facilitate a lesson by going solo. It's up to you. Listeners can be online, mobile, in cars with Bluetooth, or listen through Amazon's Echo by asking, Alexa, play Dream Vision 7 Radio Network. For more details, go to dreamvision7radio.com and click on Host for the Day.
You can't establish your brand's authority without a voice. That's why, since 2004, O'Brien Communications Group, OCG, has been helping companies establish their authority, find their brands, distinct voices, and position their brands effectively and persuasively. So effectively that 9 of OCG's clients have been acquired by other companies. OCG's business model emphasizes efficiency and results, not hourly billing, markups, and media commissions. That ensures OCG's advice is unbiased and its clients aren't at financial risk. If you're ready to find your voice and use it to tell your story, OCG is ready to help. You can find O'Brien Communications Group on the web at o'briencg.com. That's OBRIENCG.com, or call 860-944-9022.
Calling all authors. Have you been considering an audiobook? Well, look no further. Come take advantage of Dream Vision 7 Radio Network's unique in-house audiobook production, which includes benefits and bonuses from our radio station. Let our knowledgeable staff guide you to create the audiobook you've always dreamed of without breaking the bank. Check out our full one-stop service from A to Z, including the ACX process. Schedule a free consultation by calling 508-226-1723. That's 508-226-1723. Or go to dreamvision7radio.com.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for staying with us. Sarah, I'm going to deviate a little bit from what had been Plan A because I gave up on all notions of control.
Good for you, Mark.
Thank you. I'll pat myself on the back. It turns out that in July of this year, I found an article in Read Healthy Communications, and they had apparently spoken with you. And I just want to read you this quickly. Quote, I realized my calling wasn't only to work with people and families with a specific diagnosis, but to the extent that I can, to help bring the disability community together, rather than view each disparate piece of that community as defined by diagnosis, to recognize the collective power that the disability community holds. Wow, first of all, that's just an amazing statement and a beautiful one at that. And it ties perfectly, I think, to what you said about systemic change. So would you please share with us the birth of your daughter, her disability, how you must have felt? I'm going to guess helplessness was part of that. And what that experience was like.
Yeah. And thanks to Jen Ringler for capturing that quote as well. It was reflecting a strategic decision that I made with Empowered Together to be cross disability aligned so that we're serving everyone with any kind of a disability. And I guess that comes out of my own story where for the first 6 years of my daughter's life, we didn't have a diagnosis. So we saw that there were physical signs and developmental signs, kind of the developmental, when she was hitting developmental milestones that indicated maybe a genetic variation, but we weren't able to get the testing called whole exome sequencing that resulted in her diagnosis of a rare genetic disease until I think they did the blood draw when she was 5 years old, and we got the results 6 or 8 months later when she was 6 years old. And So the diagnosis is Wiedemann-Steiner syndrome, and there are, I want to say maybe around 1,500 people diagnosed with that worldwide. And that doesn't mean that's the total number of people that have that rare genetic disease. It just means that the path to diagnosis is challenging and expensive. And it was one of my first lessons in navigating systems. So thankfully, there was insurance to cover the testing, but to know how to access that, there's also grant funding involved. Available for that whole exome sequencing, which our geneticist told us. But again, to like have the savvy to ask, okay, does insurance cover this? Is there a grant available? Or to have an expert be able to tell us that is something that takes work. And so when Miriam was born, I had mentioned earlier, my brother died 10 years ago. I had also been removed by a board of directors from an organization I was working at. So that was really tumultuous. My husband had been deployed to Afghanistan during my pregnancy with Miriam, and then he changed jobs within the first month after Miriam was born. So there was a lot that was happening around my pregnancy with Miriam and birth, and then in the near term after that. And I share that because I think it may have complicated what we were looking at, the picture, and made it harder to figure out everything that was going on. So Miriam was missing developmental milestones. For example, she walked when she was 17 months old, and the typical milestone is around 12 months. She did have early language skills. So one of her first words was eyes, that she heard a lot in a song we would listen to. And that was something she was saying by 10 months. So that's a little early, but I look back now and I wish that we had accessed like early intervention, which Miriam would have been eligible for. I had known that was support that a parent can advocate for. So there just were so many learnings. We had some genetic testing when she was about 2 years old, and it didn't yield results. And I wish I had known to push for more testing at that point. There just was so much we didn't know. But she had really intense meltdowns, which are different from temper tantrums. These were not temper tantrums. These were just all rationality leaves the room. And a lot of stuff I won't necessarily go into for the sake of her privacy. This is her story to tell also. But from a parent perspective, I was seeing a lot behaviorally where I thought this isn't typical for a child's development. And so finally we moved around a bit. Like I said, we moved when Miriam was a month old. We moved when she was 2.5 months old to Connecticut. And that was where we were able to eventually find a geneticist that would do more intense testing. So that's a little bit of our convoluted story. In our case, diagnosis was a relief because it gave us a sense of what trajectory Miriam might be on. The disease is also a spectrum disease, so there is a broad range of potential outcomes, and she's 10 years old, so we don't entirely know what the rest of her life is going to look like, but we at least can see some adults with Wiedemann-Steiner syndrome to get a sense of what her future could look like.
The first thing that occurs to me is that any notion on a relative scale, any notion of control or letting go that I might have had seems absurdly small in comparison to what you've contended with. No wonder you're so good at letting those things go. I don't mean to even remotely get near any notions of blame, but why do you think it took so long to get a diagnosis?
Our primary care manager early on, I don't know why he didn't think that there could be something else, but he told us to just feed her more because she was underweight. Um, he said, and this is true. This is not just true of him. I've participated in a lot of disability trainings, and it's a very common refrain among parents that they are disbelieved by the medical community. And there is a movement towards family-centered care so that the family's input is centered in the care provided to a family member. And I think that's an important movement because when I was expressing concern rather than pretending like there was nothing wrong, he should have actually been listening more and at the very least referring me out earlier and perhaps more frequently. And I don't know why I was never referred to an early intervention specialist. They exist in every state. There is an agency that is appointed for every part of our country. So I don't know why that didn't happen. We were living on base. We are part of the military community. We were seen by military members for our healthcare. So maybe that was part of why it didn't happen, but I would imagine that other people living in other places have a different experience than me. So those are some of the reasons as to why I think we had to wait so long.
And I do recognize, of course, that hindsight can be a dangerous thing. And of course, we don't know what we don't know. But part of the reason I asked the question is because what you've explained and what you have learned may very well be helpful to people who have either joined us today or will see or listen to a recording. If you don't mind my asking, and if you do, please say so. What is Miriam's life like today?
Very fulfilling and meaningful. She's in a general education environment. She does have multiple learning disabilities and receives special education support and what's called an IEP or individual education plan. So we as her PPT or planning and placement team meet on an annual basis. And I say we because parents are very much a part of that team along with all the educators. There's an administrator that's generally part of that meeting. And she also can tap into social emotional support and mental health support at her school. So in addition to being diagnosed with her rare genetic disease, she's also diagnosed with ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, anxiety, and multiple learning disabilities. So those are things that people are more familiar with, which is helpful because there are approaches to supporting students who have those needs that are understood and documented. So she's been able to receive support for her needs.
I had for a client for a while a gentleman actually in Middletown named Dr. Robert Reynolds, who was a psychologist. Have you heard his name?
I have, yep.
Okay. And he was a fascinating guy to talk to and to work with. He considered ADHD to be an advantage. And he used to talk in terms of the he had a term for it, but the level of threshold. And he said the reason that kids with ADHD are sometimes considered to be problematic is only because their attentional threshold, their levels of attention are so much higher than ours that they're trying to bring other people up. And so in a classroom setting, that's perceived to be disruptive or something. And I'm asking this question because of what I learned about some of Dr. Reynolds' young patients. Is Miriam aware of her condition? Is that a fair way to put it?
Yeah, she's very aware. She is very much a self-advocate. So I'm grateful that that's a strength of hers. And when she is struggling, she says it's because I have WSS. She will use the language of, I have a disability. When she meets someone else or hears about somebody else with a disability, she feels a certain kinship towards them because she's like, oh, they have a disability, like I have a disability. And I am very much a proponent of inclusion. So inclusive education, inclusion in community activities. Miriam's just finished up her cheerleading season and she's going to do winter cheerleading as well. And that's among typical peers. So as much as I'm a proponent of that, I also love that she's found this community that is special to her, and where she knows there's something unique. There's this kinship there that doesn't exist with just everyone that she meets.
So is it fair to think, and I sincerely hope this is true, that she doesn't necessarily see her circumstances as detrimental? I love the whole idea of community and feeling that bond with people.
Yeah. I've worked a lot on emphasizing the strengths that she has. And I think it's important to not sugarcoat disability. So sometimes when we use euphemistic language, it's because probably we feel guilty about talking about disability. It's not so much people who have disabilities that feel that. And so I mean, Miriam has anxiety. That's very much something that she struggles with on a daily basis. And there are times when she asks, why did God create me like this? Why do I have WSS? As a parent, it's heartbreaking. Also, well, how do I answer that? So I don't want to, what would be the word? I don't want to convey that everything is all rainbows and roses. No. She struggles with things, but every human being struggles with things. So her struggles are probably more directly associated with her disability than somebody who doesn't have a disability and is struggling.
I've known people, I don't mean to be morbid about this. Actually, most of them are survivors, but I've known people who've had cancer and have said very positively, you have to play the hand that's dealt you. Mm-hmm. It almost sounds like Miriam might have a sense of that herself.
Yeah, I think we focus on the things that she excels at. She's extremely personable. She's extremely inclusive. And so any opportunity that I have to encourage her and remind her of these strengths and these gifts that she does have, we talk about that. Because I want to ensure that she knows just how important she is to be on this earth, to have her role to play here.
Is she aware, do you think, of how powerful and positive her advocacy is?
I think so. And the reason I say that is because she perseveres in it. So when she doesn't like the way that something is going on in school, she raises her voice and she lets people know. And she does that probably every single day. I'm sure I don't hear about every instance of that happening. And it's the same at home. Something's happening that she's not happy with, she raises her voice. There is a mantra, if you will, in the disability community that is nothing about us without us. And it's important because there have been so many decisions and legislation made that didn't include people with disabilities in the discussion around the table. And so Miriam learned that phrase, nothing about us without us. And she is also quick to use that when, say, if I'm talking about disability and it's related to her, she wants to be a part of that. So I do think she knows that she has a strong voice and that it's important to use it.
I'm going to venture that I was probably decades older than Miriam when I realized that I could have a strong voice. She sounds like she has an uncommon sense of her own agency, and I love that. Am I right in thinking that your son is younger than Miriam?
Yeah, Miriam's 10 and William is 7.
Okay. Were you at all concerned when you were pregnant with your son?
No, we had, let's see. Okay. So we'd actually not received those test results when I was pregnant. I wasn't concerned. Neither my husband nor I had ever experienced the sorts of things we were seeing in Miriam, nor had any members of our family. So for it to be a genetic anomaly that we were carrying, but without any evidence in our broader family, seemed pretty minimal, even though we didn't have those results. So I wasn't, I mean, I think my only concern was, what is this going to look like to parent two children when Miriam's needs, especially at a very young age, seem very intense?
And her brother is fine with everything, gets along with her well.
Yeah, they're definitely siblings. It's interesting to see that sibling dynamic be quite different, because Miriam, as the firstborn, is not a type A personality. William is a type A personality. He wants to jump in and do everything. And if nothing else, sometimes we have to hold it back and say, hey, Miriam has to do this for herself. You can like maybe verbally encourage her or point her in the right direction, but you have to let her do it, because he wants to help. He also is an advocate. He stands up for his sister. I think he gets very frustrated by some of her behaviors as well. It was very telling to me. He's in second grade now, and he wrote a card to his first grade teacher and said that she was fair. And that was the highest praise that he could have given anyone.
Wow.
Because in his life, I think he sometimes feels that things are not fair because of his sister. And so when he told that teacher that she was fair, she knew, she knew, and she has a son who has a disability as well. So she even like has kind of lived some of the dynamics that we have as well. And so he appreciated her being fair.
Well, the other thing I want to say too, in fairness to William, just before we go to our next break here, is that he's the guy, right? Guys are like fixers. We always think we have to fix things. No. I don't have time to hear that. I got to fix it.
Right.
So he's just doing his thing. Okay. Yeah. We're going to talk about Empowered Together when we come back, and we will take our next break right now, and we'll see you in 3 minutes.
Are you ready for the quantum age?
Humanity's next step in evolution?
Dream Vision 7 Radio Network invites you to the extraordinary platform of evolutionary voices for the quantum age.
Let's explore. Learn more about this upcoming age where we bridge science with spirituality.
Where potentiality meets reality.
Where we take compassion into action.
Our trailblazers and visionaries will ask the whys, the what ifs, while igniting continuous possibility.
Come along with us into an age beyond what we know today, where we can grow together in unity consciousness.
Experience evolutionary voices for the quantum age, Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. Eastern on DreamVision7Radio.com.
You can't establish your brand's authority without a voice. That's why, since 2004, O'Brien Communications Group, OCG, has been helping companies establish their authority, find their brands' distinct voices, and position their brands effectively and persuasively. So effectively that 9 of OCG's clients have been acquired by other companies. OCG's business model emphasizes efficiency and results, not hourly billing, markups, and media commissions. That ensures OCG's advice is unbiased and its clients aren't at financial risk. If you're ready to find your voice and use it to tell your story, OCG is ready to help. You can find O'Brien Communications Group on the web at o'briencg.com. That's OBRIENCG.com, or call 860-944-9022.
Calling all authors. Have you been considering an audiobook? Well, look no further. Come take advantage of Dream Vision 7 Radio Network's unique in-house audiobook production, which includes benefits and bonuses from our radio station. Let our knowledgeable staff guide you to create the audiobook you've always dreamed of without breaking the bank. Check out our full one-stop service from A to Z, including the ACX process. Schedule a free consultation by calling 508-226-1723. That's 508-226-1723. Or go to DreamVision7Radio.com.
Everybody has a story. Everyone's story deserves to be told. And the only bad stories are the ones we don't share. That's why Mark O'Brien created The Anxious Voyage. It's Mark's conviction that every story deserves to be shared, and his purpose is to give people in all walks of life from any circumstances a chance to tell their stories. The Anxious Voyage is now on syndicated Dream Vision 7 radio network every Monday at 1 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Time, with live broadcast every first and third Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Please tune in, please join Mark, and please share your stories.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
Welcome back once again. Thank you for staying with us. And Sarah, thank you again for being here. Just one quick question before we move on to Empowered Together. Do Miriam and William go to the same school?
They do.
Okay.
Yep, 2nd and 4th grade.
Okay. I'm just going to file that away. You mentioned before we came on the air, and this is kind of fast forwarding just a bit, that you're about to launch a pilot program for Empowered Together in New Haven. So if you would, could you please tell us about Empowered Together, about what it does, about what its aspirations are, and then I would like to know about the pilot program if I could.
Yeah, Empowered Together is helping people discover, connect with, and recommend accessible businesses. And when I say accessible, I mean physically accessible. I mean being a space where neurodivergent individuals, such as people with autism, can be there, be customers, be welcomed, have the supports that they need. And that was born out of looking at stats that say 80% of people with disabilities say their customer experiences are failures. So we know that there is a problem here with people with disabilities accessing excellent customer service. And we have a platform that has a database of accessible businesses that's available at app.empoweredtogether.us. I'll add that to the show notes. And people can go on there, find accessible businesses, and also recommend businesses that they have loved. So our pilot in New Haven is going into businesses, primarily food, recreational, and arts businesses, to assess the accessibility of those businesses. So those standards, accessibility standards that Empowered Together has created, are based on the requirements from the ADA, or Americans with Disabilities Act. It's also with the input of adults with disabilities who both are neurodivergent and have rare genetic diseases. So in some cases, if it's a food business, there will be dietary standards. Do you have accessible food on your menu? And is it clear for people that really need to know everything that they're eating? Do you have low lighting for those that have light sensitivities? And on the other hand, is there bright lighting in some places for people who need that because they have low vision or vision impairment? So it's a pretty big undertaking to be cross disability, as I mentioned earlier, meeting the needs of people with various disabilities. But we're building this database of accessible businesses and then partnering with the disability community through organizations in New Haven that serve people with disabilities, and also with thought partnership from the city of New Haven to build this and get this out to the population.
Aside from the city itself, who else is participating in the pilot?
Yeah, we have collaboration with the Commission on Disabilities in the city, with the state independent living centers and the Connecticut Disability Rights that are here in our state. We've talked to the Bureau of Rehabilitative Services, hopes that they will be a part of this. The DD Council in Connecticut, or Developmental Disability Council, is a partner in getting the word out about this. So we've really reached out to those organizations that are serving people with disabilities because they're trusted organizations. Empowered Together is relatively young in a grand scheme of things. And we know that about 20 to 25% of our population in the United States is comprised of people with disabilities. So this is a huge market that businesses also maybe entirely missing out on. And I take a positive approach to say, well, maybe the small business owners just don't know that they're missing out on this portion of the population. So the dialogue begins with inviting small business owners into this. Hey, this is an opportunity for you to serve a market that you may not presently be serving.
And are you connected with any agencies at the state level?
Yeah, the DD Council is a state level organization. I went through something called Partners in Policy Making, which is also state level. So there's kind of a network of people there. But there are other state agencies that we're not yet connected with that I think as we progress and as the pilot grows, we will connect with.
Okay. And for whatever this is worth, I actually think I can help with that because of my brother. And I have to admit to you, and I'm so happy you just shared what you shared, because my thinking somehow was that you were connecting people with things like, I don't know whether you should call them therapeutic or remedial resources or something. Mm-hmm. So I'm really happy to know that what you're really doing and that I was a little bit mistaken. And also out of curiosity, have you ever had any connection with Tune Employment Opportunities in Meriden?
No, I haven't, but I'd welcome an introduction.
Okay, yes, I would be more than happy to make one. Please tell folks how they can find you, how they can find Empowered Together, and maybe most important, how they can help you and what kind of recommendations would be most helpful. Yeah,
thank you. To go back to something you mentioned earlier, if people do sign up at app.empoweredtogether.us, they will find some therapeutic providers because those are some of the businesses that our users have recommended. So they may very well find a new provider on there that they can work with. But the focus of the pilot in New Haven is on food, recreational, and arts businesses. And that comes out of the place of recognizing people with disabilities go to businesses just like everybody else. And a lot of times those businesses are not accessible, but they ought to be. So as we think about the systemic change we want to bring about, creating a more accessible, inclusive environment, even down to the businesses in our local community, that's part of the reason that we're focused on arts, recreational, and food businesses in New Haven. We also have a good partnership with the city there that wants small businesses to become more accessible as well. So that's a great collaboration. So signing up for app.empoweredtogether.us, it's a web-based app, is a great thing for people to do. We also are on social media, and I'll send the handles over so that you can put those in the show notes. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, X, and LinkedIn. So folks can follow us there and kind of learn about our journey. And they also can see the link through those to sign up to get on our mailing list to learn more. If you're a small business owner and you're in the greater New Haven area, please get in touch with us because we'd like to partner with you. And if you're a person with a disability, really anywhere, you can get on the platform. We're going to be focusing on getting a critical mass of businesses in New Haven. So if you live in that area, or a family member or know somebody with a disability who might benefit from this, please do tell them about what we're doing. And your website is empoweredtogether.us, correct? Yes. Okay. People can get to the app through that as well. Okay. And I will, when I share recordings of this program, I will definitely include links to that. And I just want to make one more point before we go, and that is, I think it's important for businesses to recognize the benefits to them of employing the people that you would like to see employed and the people that you would like to see included. And it's not just,
it's not just some superficial sort of PR benefit. Again, I'm going to use your word community and steal your term or your phrase systemic change. That I think once employers start to realize those benefits, that's where the real change starts to happen. So I will be happy to share that too.
Thanks,
Sarah.
Mark. Yeah. Harvard Business Review recently did a study that businesses that employ people with disabilities far outpace their peers that don't place any value on that. So there is statistical evidence to support what you just said.
All right. Thank you for sharing that too, because I will look that up and share that as part of my sharing this program. Sarah, thank you so much. I'm so happy you joined us. I hope to talk to you again. And for everybody else on the program, thank you for joining us, and happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning into The Anxious Voyage, the program dedicated to sharing stories, helping people, and celebrating life. You can see and listen to The Anxious Voyage on syndicated Dream Vision 7 radio network every Monday at 1 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Time, with live broadcast every first and third Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern. If you have a story to tell, or if you know someone who does, please email the host, Mark O'Brien, at mark@o'briencg.com. In the meantime, please remember, the only bad stories are the ones we don't share.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.